We start on Parliament Hill with some live pictures coming in from the feed there inside of the House of Commons. There is high drama playing out. MPs have been voting for almost 24 hours now. The Conservatives slowing down Liberal spending bills over the Trudeau government's carbon tax.
Mr. Poilievre continues to gaslight Canadians for clickbait. What he is doing is not going to accomplish any of his objectives.
We are going to keep doing this. The purpose of this, as you heard our leader Pierre Poilievre say the other day, was to do everything we can to hold up Justin Trudeau's destructive agenda. And if he wants to get out of Ottawa, get out of town early, he's going to have to listen to us and take the tax off.
What he was trying to do was cancel Christmas, but what he's really done is cancel his own credibility.
All right, let's bring in some of the MPs who've been dealing with this voting marathon. Kevin Lamoureux is the Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader, Liberal MP for the riding of Winnipeg North. Eric Duncan, the Conservative Caucus Party Liaison, MP for the Ontario riding of Stormont, Dundas, South Glengarry. And Peter Julian, he's the NDP's House Leader and MP for the BC riding of New Westminster, Burnaby. Eric, let me start with you. Critics are calling this whole thing a stunt. What are you guys trying to accomplish here, actually?
We are trying to hold up Justin Trudeau's failed economic agenda. We are calling a series of votes to highlight our opposition to the quadrupling of the carbon tax and just projecting over and over again, vote after vote, that we do not have confidence in this Prime Minister and their economic agenda.
Peter, let me ask your reading on this marathon and what you think is at stake here and what we're seeing.
The votes that the Conservatives have put forward include votes to cut healthcare funding, including the National Suicide Prevention Line, which is so important, cuts to affordable housing, cuts for Indigenous people, cuts to national defense, cuts for correctional services, cuts to farmers, cuts to Atlantic Canadians, Indigenous peoples. It's just unbelievably bizarre. There has not been a single vote on the price on carbon. All of these votes that the Conservatives have been provoking are cutting services that Canadians depend on. And this is why this stunt has been so unsuccessful, has triggered such a negative public reaction. Also, the fact that Mr. Poilievre only showed up for 1 hour of we're now going on 40 hours of these votes, and the cost to Canadians, over $1 million that the Conservatives have squandered on these votes to cut all of the services that Canadians depend on. And Mr. Poilievre showed up for an hour out of the whole 2 days.
Eric, let me ask you about that. Where was your leader? As Peter's pointing out, Pierre Poilievre only there for a very small part of this voting marathon.
Well, the leader, Pierre, has been voting over and over again over the course of the last 24 hours. And I was with him in the chamber doing the evening shift. He came in at 1 a.m. and for several hours right into the early morning was there voting repeatedly over and over again with our team and our colleagues. So we're taking the opportunity. And I say, what we're doing here is there's been a full legislative day killed here on Parliament Hill. That's another day that Justin Trudeau and the NDP coalition don't have the opportunity to advance. If it's the carbon tax and all the same failed plans that have got us into the economic mess. Canadians are hurting and they are watching us as we are highlighting the pain that they are going through. When there's 2 million people a month using a food bank, and when people are coming up to the Christmas season wondering not about just even Christmas presents and gifts, but whether they can pay their natural gas or propane bill, they're looking for some carbon tax relief, and we're going to fight for that every single step of the way here in Ottawa.
Eric,
there's no need to get out of town early and go on Christmas vacation at all.
Yeah, let's let Peter weigh in. Peter.
Yeah, well, first thing, we saw the same thing from Pierre Poilievre back in the summer. He said he was going to keep people right through the summer, and then he just gave up after an hour. This is what Pierre Poilievre does. The reality is the fact that the Conservatives have opposed the school lunch program for kids that are hungry, the fact that they wanted to cut massive amounts from affordable housing that Canadians need to see now. It's true the Trudeau government hasn't acted as quickly as it needs to, but the reality is the Conservatives are saying we'll make things far, far worse. And so there's no excuse to say if the New Democrats always want to keep working. We're the worker bees of Parliament. We can work through Christmas. We can put more funding in place. But what the Conservatives want to do is take this time to cut all those services, including health care, including supports for affordable housing that Canadians depend on. And so, quite frankly, this is disingenuous and dishonest how the Conservatives have approached this whole stunt.
Eric, let me ask you just specifically about one vote involving funding for Ukraine. And I know the Ukrainian Canadian Congress has already come out and said that this issue should not be, playing politics, sort of casting, some clouds on what you guys are doing here as it relates to funding for Ukraine. That's something your party has voted against. And there are a number of other issues that you guys have been voting against. Just the optics of that. What do you think?
Well, there's been 24 hours of votes, and what we're doing is this isn't just one budget vote. What we're doing is we're stretching out and calling the question multiple times. And what we're voting no for is no confidence in Justin Trudeau and the NDP Liberal coalition. And we're voting no to their failed economic plan. We're voting no against quadrupling the carbon tax in the coming years. When Peter mentions all the different programs and the struggles that Canadians are facing, it is the NDP that's propping the Liberals up on the same failed approach for the last 8 years that got us into the mess that we are seeing across this country now. When we have record food bank usage, when we've seen housing prices, rent prices, mortgage payments all double, that is thanks to Justin Trudeau and the NDP Liberal coalition and what they've done with their economic agenda. So we are taking it vote by vote. Every vote of no is a vote of non-confidence in their failed economic agenda, and it's no against the carbon tax. And we'll do it over and over and over again.
Not true. Those votes are amounts that help Canadians, and you have voted to stop those amounts from going to help Canadians on affordable housing. That's the reality, Eric. You can't try to sugarcoat this. You know how you've been voting. You know what you've done. That's why the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress has reacted. That's why the cuts to national defense that you're proposing, the cuts to the RCMP, to correctional services, why it has triggered such a negative reaction is because you put in place a stunt without thinking of the consequences.
Yeah,
and that's why I think
the negative
your
reaction
actions over the last 24 hours.
We just want to remind our
What's
viewers
deplorable
that,
is the fact the NDP is propping up the Liberals. That's what Canadians are frustrated with, that over 100 votes every single time of these, every one of these is confidence votes in the Prime Minister's economic agenda, and it's being propped up by the NDP. That's what Canadians have had enough of, Peter.
We want to remind our viewers that we are trying to connect with Kevin Lamoureux for the
They're
Liberals.
confidence votes, Peter.
We're trying to connect with Kevin Lamoureux for the Liberals, and we'll get him as soon as we can.
Voted no.
Yeah, we're
suicide prevention. You voted no. These are amounts. These are figures of supports that are offered to Canadians. So, I mean, you can take this disingenuous approach and say, well, no, there's something else that we're actually voting on. But the reality is Canadians see the voting record, see the Conservatives wanted to gut all of these services, including services that you said you supported. And each one of these votes is a receipt. It's a track record to say, well, Conservatives, if they had a majority in the House right now, they would be ending affordable housing. They would be cutting back on health care. There wouldn't be a suicide prevention line. Just something that all Canadians agree on. No supports for Indigenous peoples, no supports for farmers, no supports for the fisheries, no supports for Atlantic Canadians. Those are the votes. And these are the votes that, of course, New Democrats are going to be taking across the country. And Conservatives are going to have to justify their votes whenever the next campaign comes, because these cuts are deplorable, they were irresponsible, and you voted for them each and every time.
The Conservatives, Peter, are not the first.
What's disingenuous is the fact they try to criticize the Liberals, like Peter just tried to do about 45 seconds ago, and then when it actually comes to voting against what he says he doesn't agree with on the Liberals, he votes for it, and he votes for confidence in Justin Trudeau. So again, they say one thing, disingenuous, they try to criticize, and then every time the question gets called, they give full, total confidence, this unequivocal confidence to the Prime Minister.
All right, I'm going to jump in. Guys, hold on. We want to bring in Kevin Lamoureux. He's the Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader. He was waiting for us to connect with him, some technical issues that we've now sorted out. Kevin, good to see you joining us on the panel. A little feisty, as you may have been hearing there. Your take on what we've been seeing for the past almost 24 hours now in the House.
Well, you know, it's disappointing in the sense that there is definitely an issue in regards to the Conservative Party just doesn't want to recognize that there is an environmental issue or climate change. And as a result, I think they've taken an irresponsible approach to talking about a tax cut on the carbon tax, or axe the tax, which makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. What it reminds me of is the extreme right approach of someone like Donald Trump, where it's all about catch that bumper sticker, talk a lot about it. Who cares if it's not factually correct? Because it's not. From coast to coast to coast, we have Conservatives that are going out there saying that there's going to be more disposable income for Canadians when that's just not factually correct. So they're taking that issue and now they're bringing it to the floor of the House of Commons and threatening, well, we're going to ruin your Christmas. Well, quite frankly, I'll sit until Christmas time. It doesn't bother me at all. At the end of the day, we need to get legislation through. It's there to support Canadians in a very real and tangible way. There's definitely a lack of leadership that's coming from the Conservative Party today, and I blame it, quite frankly, on how the far right has virtually taken over the leadership of the Conservative Party. And it's somewhat sad. We even see things such as the Canada-Ukraine trade agreement being voted against. First time ever that I've seen a Conservative Party vote against a trade agreement, and they've chosen the Canada-Ukraine trade agreement. It makes no sense at all. And that's the type of policy decisions that we are seeing. It just doesn't make sense unless you start to look at south of the border and the type of tactics we see from the extreme right. And that's why I say the amount of influence that is being taken over from that far right is having a profound negative impact here in Canada, and it's being brought in by Pierre Poilievre. And I think that people should be aware of that. You know, I've been now, I guess I woke up, Thursday morning at 6 o'clock in the morning. I've been at the Parliament Hill from inside the chamber at 10 o'clock. I think it's 6 o'clock now type of thing. So 30 plus hours. And it has been nonstop since 5:45 Thursday. We've been voting. We'll probably go maybe till midnight tonight. So I do get to go to the bathroom and get some food here and there. But at the end of the day, they want to play these games. We're going to continue to be there to push the government agenda. And we're grateful that we have some opposition parties that recognize that, the price on pollution, well, the environment does matter to Canadians.
Hey,
and it doesn't take more money out of Canadians' pockets.
Yeah, to Eric. And Eric, the accusations coming from the left and the government as well about this being sort of a Republican-style, right-wing extreme politics being imported to our country by your leader.
It is. It's terrible.
That is not the case. What we are doing is this could be all ended. The voting could be done instantly and could be over if the Prime Minister would agree to axe the carbon tax and provide carbon tax relief and the pain of all of that to farmers, First Nations, and families. We've been highlighting this for months now, over and over again, the damaging effect the carbon tax is having on families. There's millions of Canadians that are using a food bank every month. A lot of people are going into the Christmas holidays wondering how they're going to pay their bills, their mortgages, and they're hurting. And what they want is, they want to see some pressure here in Ottawa on Justin Trudeau and the NDP to finally change and provide that relief. The Prime Minister has done it before. He's done certain carve-outs in certain cases, and we're saying he needs to do the same for farmers, First Nations, and families who are desperately asking for this. And I'll just say about the carbon tax, it is not an environmental plan, it's a tax plan because they've never met any environmental targets they set for themselves, and instead the carbon tax, when they tax farmers that grow the food and they tax truckers that ship the food, they are driving up the price of grocery bills. Again, $700 more projected in 2024, announced just this week in a report. It is staggering and it's extremely frustrating how tone deaf the Liberals are by having no problem to go along with the NDP and quadruple the carbon tax when it's already punishing people so badly as it is.
Peter, Julian.
Well, and you see, that's just it. That's what's the absolute crap. The Conservative government, the Conservative Party doesn't know in terms of the degree in which they are spreading false information. When they say cut the tax or cut the carbon tax, they're actually not talking about the rebate. Most people, and the parliamentary budget officer has been very clear, 80% of Canadians are getting more money back. So if you cut the carbon tax, that means you're taking money out of the pockets of Canadians.
Farmers and businesses get no rebates whatsoever.
It is absolutely misleading, and that's why you get the creeping of the conservative right that's coming from from the U.S. into Canadian politics. And I say shame on Mr. Poilievre for entertaining it. I'm sure Donald Trump might be proud, but I'll tell you, Canadians are not going to benefit by this stupid policy.
Peter, Julian.
And the Conservatives voted to cut supports to farmers, to cut supports to Indigenous peoples just over the last 24 hours, and to families. And we saw them reject the school lunch program for children that are struggling. I mean, the NDP has been putting in place and pushing this government to act, including on affordable housing, on dental care, pushing on pharmacare. The grocery rebates came out of Jagmeet Singh and the NDP, pushing hard. So what we see is the NDP producing results. And what the Conservatives want to do is cut all of those services that people depend on. It's hard to say you're an advocate for farmers when you've just voted 3 times, Eric, to cut services and supports to farmers right across Canada. It just makes no sense how the Conservatives have approached this. That's why it's blown up in their face, because it's impossible for a Conservative MP to justify the votes that they've undertaken over the last 24 hours to cut all those services. Families are struggling. The NDP doubles down and pushes hard so that things actually get to people to provide those supports. And what the Conservatives seem to want to do is take it all away from them. And this is why I find it just extremely disingenuous how the Conservatives have acted, particularly this week.
We're out of time, gentlemen, but I know it's been a very busy day for all 3 of you and a very busy night, and there's lots more voting to go. Thank you for taking time for Power Play, though, to get your viewpoints out there. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. Much appreciated.
Eric.
Thank you very much. And it's great to be able to vote actually online on CTV. We just finished doing the vote.
Kevin Lamoureux joining us, Eric Duncan, and Peter Julian.